Welcome to Open Mic from Modalis Infrastructure Partners, where aviation talks and the world listens. From global airport and aviation developments to disruptive technology, airport investment, and much more, we unpack the trends, technologies, challenges, and opportunities shaping the global aviation industry. Now here's your host, Curtis Grad.
Welcome to Airport IR Open Mic Podcast by Modalis. I'm very pleased to introduce today's guest, Belinda Jain, Vice President, Customer Experience and Commercial at JFK International Air Terminal, better known as the operator of JFK Terminal 4. Belinda, thank you and welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for inviting me, Curtis. Nice to see you.
We've been able to see each other a few times over the last year or so at different conferences, but thought it was overdue for us to have a proper catch-up on Open Mic.
It's really lovely to be with you again.
And we go back a long way. I guess we first met back in Queen Alia in Jordan on what a certain friend of ours used to call the Beautiful Project. That was started in 2008. We went through a lot of interesting times there. It was a pretty challenging project back in the beginning. It seems like we must have done something right, though, because it's been a pretty remarkable success story. I guess, what did they start with? 4 million passengers back in 2007, and now 2025, we're nearly 10 million passengers, which goes well beyond any of those even initial optimistic forecasts. So what do you think is the most enduring memory of those days, and why do you think that this project was a success? It's pretty interesting case study for sure.
This project was very special for me. I was involved in the bidding process for the airport and then joined the management team.
Right.
So, as part of the tender process, I was developing the 25-year marketing plan for the airport. And early in the process, I realized that the work that we do in airports do not only affect the airport, but also affects the economy, the tourism and aviation industry of the country.
Exactly.
Also, as you remember, in this BOT, the shareholders were also involved in the operations and the development of the project as contractors. So I guess the most memorable lesson for me, which I tend to follow up to date, is that I have two employers in every airport project. I'm involved in the corporate entity that owns and runs the airport, and the airport itself is my second employer. My loyalty always goes to the airport because the impacts that are connected are wider than in a business enterprise.
Yeah. Well, and I remember that vividly coming in as the CEO about 3 or 4 months into the project. You guys were already on the ground. ADP was the operator, but there was 300 and some odd employees, in which 6 or 7 of them were ADP employees, and it was always a bit of an issue of divided loyalty. You felt that paychecks were coming from Paris, not from Amman. But I always felt I knew who you were working for. I won't comment on some of the others, but we knew where your loyalties rested, and it was a pretty interesting, challenging project. And when I talk about that certain someone that was calling it the Beautiful Project, that was our good friend Rodolfo, and he and I were the only sort of other expats in the company at the time. So it was an interesting mix and challenging, but as you say, having contractors in the boardroom and others made every board meeting a bit of a, we had Game of Thrones going on before we knew what that meant. Yeah, exactly. So, I guess now it's been, 2.5 years since you joined the JFK Terminal 4 team, and sounds like you've been enjoying yourself, but what have you been working on so far, and what other plans do you have in the works?
Well, it's been an incredible journey so far. And while it's coming with challenges, the work has been very rewarding. As you know, at JFK, each terminal is managed independently. And in my role, I lead 2 main projects. A North Star program, which reimagines the future of Terminal 4 across key pillars of experience: the employee experience, the passenger experience, airlines, commercial, and terminal ambiance. This program lays on delivering a unified JFK experience aligned to the vision of the Port Authority of New York, New Jersey, while establishing what makes Terminal 4 distinct: our airline mix and our passenger profiles, and of course, our culture. The second largest project at hand at the moment is the commercial redevelopment, which consists of the major overhaul of all our concession program, from awarding new contracts to developing new concepts, We are revamping up to 100 concessions, going through a complete renovation at the moment with new brands, new concepts, a very strong New York sense of place. This redevelopment brought new lounges first to Terminal 4, followed by a revamp in our convenience stores and our food and beverage program. And in the next 2 years, we'll be continuing also with our retail and duty-free experiences. I don't know if you've read the news, but we've awarded last week officially our duty-free contract for 16 years to a partnership of Avianta International with international shops. It's a joint venture that benefits from global and local understanding and expertise, and we're very excited to kickstart this program with them now.
Well, that's interesting. I got to know Arianta in Cyprus as well.
That's true.
They were and are continuing to be part of that consortium, but 16 years, that's a long concession, right?
Well, it's long from the perspective of European airports, maybe, but I would say in the environment in which we are, with very intensive capital expense and very expensive manpower, it's the time that you need to ensure that the business is sustainable.
I always felt that was always kind of one of the issues with the European concessions. They were almost too short to really get a good knowledge of the business and even the evolution of the business. You're probably looking at possibly 2 or 3 cyclings of the capital investment throughout that 16-year period too, right?
In some European airports now, you also have more and more joint venture with airports.
Yes.
We've had it in Paris. Schiphol recently had something similar as well with their duty-free concession. So I think it's becoming a bit more long-term as well, except that the airports are getting more and more involved in the business of concessions.
Back in Jordan, I think we had a
duty-free
full
was
master
25 years.
Yeah, exactly. And so you have to have a very strong relationship built from the start, and it comes right down to the capital planning as well. And again, that was a big part of what you and I worked on in Jordan at the time. Is you can think about the next 5 years, but what about the 20 that go after it, right?
You need to set up the governance that allows you really to not only manage when you're here, but also over the years when you're no longer there.
Yeah, like these shorter term concessions are almost relationship based, because the person you negotiated the deal may very well be there at the end of the deal. But when it's a 25-year sub-concession, you've got to make sure you've got resilience and evolution built into the documents for sure. So now you held a fairly similar role in Mumbai as VP Commercial. That was the new terminal development project. How do these two experiences between JFK and Mumbai compare? I'm sure there's some similarities, but there's probably lots of differences there too, right?
Well, I guess Terminal 2 in Mumbai was a brand new terminal. So while my role was similar, I worked very early on the design and planning of the commercial space. So working at early stage with architects and designers, deciding how much square footage we are going to be allocating to each concession category, and also where in the terminal we wanted that space to be located. At Terminal 4, we are a running terminal, which has been operational close to 25 years now. And to achieve the optimum ratio between, food and beverage, retail, duty-free lounges, we had to convert spaces. We need to reconfigure some concession layout, and all that while serving 80,000 to 90,000 passengers a day who still need to be able to eat. So that has been a different operational challenge. The one thing, though, that I would say is very similar and has been similar to airport development that I've worked with, and you have been one of them along with me in Jordan, I would say is again and again, every time we touch on infrastructure upgrade or redevelopment, it affects the organization and the communities. And I really discover over the years that I'm deeply passionate with the work we are doing when it actually also helps the community, the employees in airports, to update their skill set in new ways of working in the infrastructure that they suddenly inherit. I think that has been a really fantastic experience. You set the standard with the terminal infrastructure, and then you set a standard with the experience of the people who work there.
And I think, you make a good point about when you've got a brand new concession, a brand new program like we did in Jordan, it's a blank slate. When you're stepping into an operation that's been operating for over 20 years, there's a lot of established retailers and commercial operators there that have a pretty good idea of how the business runs, and you're kind of coming in on a train that's already moving down the track, and trying to redirect some of that program is sometimes challenging. I'm sure, and they both come with challenges, but at the end of the day, it's about how you make good business decisions based on data. And I guess the tricky part is when you start with a brand new airport or terminal like Jordan, you don't have the track record of the data. But I guess you've been spending a lot of time in JFK trying to develop and leverage the data that you have, right, to make good decisions.
We started actually a little bit in a blank state from a data perspective. We had a lot of data coming from the concessionaires, but they were not necessarily aligned to the passenger mix or to the way the airlines also were planning their development at Terminal 4. So we actually really engaged in a lot of workshops and passenger surveys and insight, and trying to collate all this data together and try to understand how we are working in collaborative way to ensure that we actually deliver the best experience to our passengers. For instance, we used to have our ASQ with relatively low scores in the concession for variety of food and beverages. So we still had the square footage, but we didn't necessarily provide a variety of culinary experiences. Over the last couple of years, we've really invested on that with our F&B partners. And currently, not only we have been awarded as the most improved terminal at JFK this year with ASQ, but we also see that particular line of variety of food and dining experiencing increased. So data is important, and working together without making any presumption is also important.
Exactly. And, we'll talk a little bit more in a bit about your customer experience program, but I find it interesting that CX, in some clients, it rests with operations. Sometimes it rests with commercial, as it does with you. And in some organizations, it's completely different, or it's completely separate from the two, and it operates independently. But I don't know that there's a right answer for every occasion, but it seems like every organization finds a different way of approaching CX and building it into the culture. Or if they're not successful, sometimes it's not even that it's embedded in the culture, it's an afterthought. But it seems in JFK Terminal 4, you're really forefront about the customer experience relating to commercial activity and the flow through the terminal, right?
Yes. So again, I think we're looking at terminal experience rather than customer experience, because we also consider that employees, passengers, airlines are equally our customers. And so we wanted to reinforce the message across the organization that it's the terminal experience, and envisaging all these pillars of experience with a particular roadmap, with a particular focus area. And, while, for instance, on the commercial program, we are emphasizing a New York sense of place, we also equally work on how do we work with our concession partners? What is the governance system we want with our partners? So it's not only delivering the end user experience as passengers, it's also how do we work together, and similarly with airlines or our employees. We don't only consider the employees of JFK IT, we consider the employees of our business partners, of our concession partners, the whole ecosystem of the terminal as part of our employee experience.
And they're also consumers too.
And they are consumers, of course. They are consumers in our food and beverage, and they are also every day utilizing the space, utilizing the infrastructure. So it's important also that they are satisfied with it so that they can deliver the best experience to the passengers.
It's kind of an interesting story. Every time I come through Vancouver Airport, I walk by this 7-Eleven, this convenience store, which you think, it's a 7-Eleven, it's a convenience store, whatever. It is the most highly used store on landside by all the airport employees because it's accessible to everybody. And when you're on a more restricted wage, that becomes important. So you've got to be able to market your offer to the full range of clients. Not everybody's buying Gucci, right?
That's correct. And interesting enough, there's also beyond the concession program, something very interesting at Terminal 4 is we realized when we did employee engagement surveys that we have generations of employees there. The parents worked and then their kids working at Terminal 4. There's a very strong loyalty to the terminal. They really want to continue working at the terminal, but they also want to, do other things, work for different companies. And so an element that we are working on at the moment is also to create an HR network so that we are able to really have transparency on the job skills, have transparency on the job offers that are available across the terminal, and also share best practices among HR experts in the best way to build this community of employees at Terminal 4.
That's that culture bit that you talked about a bit earlier, right? Yeah, for sure.
We call it the T4 state of mind. It's a very strong
Okay, I
culture
like that. Yeah, that's like a New York state
existed
of mind. I
before.
like it. I like it. So changing gears a bit, we have this tradition on IR Open Mic where we love to talk about and share crazy stories and memorable events from our career. And you and I experienced a few of those ourselves, but we'd love to hear about the craziest thing you've ever experienced in your airport career so far.
I don't know if it's crazy, but I think it's something that everyone can relate to in our industry, is the day of an opening of a new terminal. You're 1 minute earlier, you're finishing your touch-ups and, the terminal is still brand new and suddenly a minute later, passengers are here, totally unfazed. Like they've been always there. I think it's a very
it's a
emotional
combination
moment
of
in our industry.
anticipation and absolute terror, right? It's like, I can't wait, but oh my God, if anything goes wrong, God help us all, right?
Yeah,
So,
you've done your ORA 10 times. You're already set up. And the first passenger comes and you still don't know if it's a passenger or one of your colleagues.
Exactly.
And they just walk in the space like it was open forever, which I think is very emotional. And I think anyone who has been in the industry is able to relate to that very crazy moment.
No, it's one of those memorable things that every time you open a terminal, it's really sort of seared in your mind for the rest of your life, right? The good, the bad, and sometimes the ugly. But honestly, half the time, the things that we are worried about, nobody else notices either, right? Nobody expects perfection on the first day. At least they shouldn't. You also spent some time with Chanel in Mumbai. That sounds like an interesting experience. And if I recall, your early career, you also had background in fashion and retail. So this is kind of combining to almost everything that you've done in your career, landing on your lap in JFK. But how has this shaped your perspective on commercial strategy?
So I work for Nike and Chanel, and both are very strong brands. I think having worked for these brands shaped how I look at terminals and how I see airports as brands and destinations on their own. As I said earlier, finding what makes them consistent with the environment in which they are, the circumstances of the place in which they're located. And to layer that, I guess my retail experience influences the belief that customer experience is paramount and is actually central function to any business.
Yeah, it's at the end of the day, it all comes down to pulling all the experience you've had in your career together to leverage what you do in your in your current role. And that's, I guess, when you're young, you don't know what you don't know when you start your career, but suddenly you're like, oh, I'm actually learning things as I go and applying it. So it's been interesting to watch the evolution in your career. Like we all know each other from when we know each other, right? But then you start looking, wow, I didn't realize she was in Mumbai. I didn't realize what she was doing. So as I was getting prepared for this interview, I knew a lot of that, but it was kind of a good reminder that we don't all just sit idle waiting for the next time we're going to sit down for a glass of wine and a ketchup, right?
Yeah, I think every experience actually led me to the next experience. Everything that you learn, you know, technically or just through the experiences and the challenges you're facing, helps you for the next role. In my case, it looks a bit disconnected or disjointed from people's perspective because I have fashion, I have retail, I have airports globally and locally, but ultimately I think that everything, when you tell the story, everything is very interconnected, and our world is more and more connected. And it's very interesting to see people moving from one organization to another, but ultimately very strong industry, right?
That's part of the great joy that I get now, being able to, connect people that I've met through the course of my career. And I did this recently with you and a good friend of mine when we were in Toronto a few months back at an ACI conference, and was able to introduce you to Elizabeth Brown, who is now the CEO in Victoria. But, our history goes back a long ways, Elizabeth and I as well. My wife and I were in Jamaica for 3.5 years, and then her and her husband were there as well. And so you have that sort of common denominator that you always kind of go back to. And over the years, we've got a chance to continue keeping in touch, but also doing some work with her in different places, like in San Diego and even in Victoria as well. But it was fun to see the two of you connect and share some stories as well.
Yes, I think that moment was very special to me. And over the last couple of months, I've also been lucky to meet a lot of women in our industry at leadership level. I think that we often don't know each other as much, and every one of us, their own journey, their own experience. But I realized that it's at any age, at any level of your experience, being able to connect with other women who have gone through some of your challenges or not yet gone through the challenges, whether you're looking up or having someone looking at you also with questions. It's really a great opportunity to reinforce that women's spirit and sisterhood as well.
Well, and on that theme, about 1.5 years ago, I guess, I introduced you to a good friend of mine and a good friend of hers as well. This is Sev, and Peter G, as we like to call him, did a bit of work for you at JFK, and it was really interesting to get the three of you acquainted and start working on the program. It was fairly early on when you joined JFK, but that customer experience program and what you're trying to accomplish there, really trying to set T4 apart from the others. And you talked about this earlier, but you've got competing terminals. It's a bit unusual in that in many airports you're competing against other airports, but in one hunk of real estate, you're competing with other terminals that are already established, but others that are being developed as well. And be kind of interested to hear about how you see yourself setting yourself apart from the existing competitors and the future ones, and what you see in store for the competition, and what that means for the passenger as well, because I think there's healthy tension when you've got competition between terminals, right?
Yeah. There's a healthy tension, but ultimately we are all aligned to a unified vision from the Port Authority of New York, New Jersey in one JFK. So there's a lot of, I would say, baseline vision and baseline experience that we all set. And then we have, again, different vision for our terminals based on our passenger profiles and our airline partners. And then we also have different culture and way of working. So for the last 25 years, JFK IT has developed a very collaborative culture at Terminal 4 with our airline and business partners. We really act as a community. It's our strength. It's our differentiating asset. And as I mentioned, while we're building this unifying vision, we actually have built on top of the JFK 1 vision, a very distinctive Terminal 4 vision, which was developed with the contribution of our airline partners the employees and the stakeholders all together. So that makes us very strong and continue to be very agile as the business requirement needs.
And that's the art and the science, I guess, behind, with the Port Authority providing enough guideline and structure to have that one sort of vision for the overall airport, but not to constrict or suffocate the creativity of each individual terminal operator and their vision. And each one of those groups of airlines has a very different focus as well. If you're an LCC, you have a different view of what you expect from your terminal versus long haul international, or when you've got the luxury carriers coming in from Qatar or Dubai or where have you. So, it's a kind of an interesting experiment that's been going on for 20 some odd years.
Yes, we're lucky to have airline partners that are very dedicated to deliver the best customer experience on board, whether we're looking obviously at Delta, our anchor tenant, whether we're thinking Singapore Airlines, Emirates, but Virgin Atlantic as well, or
Exactly.
Air India, El Al. These are very strong carriers that really invest a lot in their passenger experience, and we are obviously setting our standard to the game that they are also asking us to.
And it goes to that next layer with your retailers and your food and beverage operators as well. And they've become pretty adept at understanding who's coming off of which airplane and what their customer profile is. So learning from your operators is pretty important as well.
That's correct. And, again, just as a memory, we have more than 135,000 square feet of lounge. I think that probably we're still the largest footprint in lounge in the US.
That's huge.
Which
Yeah.
obviously sets a certain standard in terms of what is the premium experience outside of the lounge in our gatehold areas, for instance, or in our retail hall areas.
So when you're not plotting commercial and customer experience strategy, what are you doing in your spare time? What about hobbies, entertainment, amusement, maybe the odd obsession? You've got to have something more than just work, I hope.
Well, my obsession is about travel and discovering new places and culture. And I'm also a big foodie, and living in New York, it's such a ground for exploration of food and new restaurants. So my weekends are pretty busy with that.
Well, and I can attest to that. I do recall us having a very nice meal in New York. I can't remember where it was. Maybe you remember, but it was a place you'll have to redirect me, or we'll have to share another meal again next time I'm in New York.
Anytime, Curtis.
Actually, I was going to ask you earlier, anything you miss from the food scene in Mumbai, or were you able to find everything you were missing from India in New York?
Well, over the last 5 years, I would say New York has become a really good scene for Indian food, but there is one snack that I used to have in India and I have not been able to find as good, is called pani puri. So it's a snack that I've tried in different places in New York. It doesn't taste the same as it was in Bandra, Mumbai.
Well, and I find that as well when you think about our history and where we've traveled and where we've lived, that when you've had Lebanese food in Jordan, which is largely Lebanese expats living in Jordan, it's the real deal, right? And as good as it might be in New York or Vancouver or wherever, it's never quite the same. And I'm a bit of a wanderlust type person as well. And that's the fun of all these crazy projects we work on, is you get to experience the culture, the food.
And learn the language.
And learn the language or learn the customs. But the tricky part is that you're never fully satisfied. You want to keep on traveling. So I guess we just have to keep on doing that, right?
Yeah, talking about the language, you know how easy it is to ultimately start understanding what people are saying in a different language because you live there, but you never are able to make a sentence.
There's another real prime example of somebody speaking the language. Remember our good friend Mohammed Reda in Jordan, the chief technical officer? The guy spoke 5 languages plus the technical language of airports. And he had so much he was trying to express that sometimes it was in all 5 languages and technical at the same time. And so I always felt you needed a little teleprompter below, because it was a pretty complex project, but trying to express how to make it work was not always easy, not just for Mohammed, but for all of us as well. And I really look back on that time fondly, but it was the most stressful time in my life, but it was also one of the most satisfying as well. So
We had such a good time.
so we're heading to the home stretch here, and we like to cap off with something we call magic mirror. And it's not a scientifically proven psychometric test of any sort, but it's just to get to know you a little bit better. And so we've got a set of 15 questions. It's meant to be rapid fire, whatever comes to the top of your mind. And we'll start with something aviation. Your favorite aircraft, civilian, military, current, or historical?
So I'm not very good in type of aircraft, but I would say anything with Embraer, because I love smaller aircraft. I feel that when you're on a smaller aircraft, you actually feel like you're flying. So I have a particular fondness for Embraer.
Yeah, it's more personal for sure. And again, when you look back at JFK, and I had the good chance of spending some time at the TWA terminal and looking back in time, and you see the old Constellation on display there. And I got to meet your CEO Roel during that period as well. And it was literally like stepping back in time into that old terminal. And you look at that airplane, you go, that's when airplanes and aviation it was still chic and it was still novel. And sometimes you feel like it's been commoditized now, right? Good thing in this part of Canada, there's still lots of routes that have smaller airplanes, so you get that more personal taste. How about apples and oranges?
Apples.
Your favorite? Apples, coffee or tea?
Coffee.
I knew that. And flat or sparkling?
Very much sparkling.
Yes, I knew that answer as well. This one I don't know. Preference for cats or dogs?
Dogs, but more specifically, my beagle, Dia.
Okay. And scariest animal?
Cockroach.
Cockroach. Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
I'm very scared of them,
My,
particularly when you travel in Asia, like in Malaysia. I've seen one of the cockroaches that probably had the size of my hand. It can be
yeah.
very
Well,
big.
you know my wife Sally, and she can be quite expressive. And she stepped on a dead cockroach in Jamaica once. I thought there was a murderer in the house. Like, oh my God! Thank God it was dead. But yeah, I agree. Cockroaches are not warm and cuddly. That's for sure. Favorite classic car?
Porsche Cayman.
Yes, very nice. Famous person, living or dead, that you'd like to have dinner with? That's always an interesting question to ask.
Alive, Hillary Clinton. She still very much inspires me.
Okay. Yeah, that would be an interesting conversation, and it might be one of those you want to just keep on talking for sure.
I agree.
Greatest fear?
Well, still today, public speaking, but I work on it.
Okay. Well, you're doing fantastic here, and there's only literally hundreds of thousands of people listening, right? We're still working on the subscribers, but we're getting close. Favorite dessert?
Any pastry with coffee.
Okay. And earliest memory?
I'm not sure I remember the earlier, but there's one that I often quote. I wrote my first check when I was 5 at a restaurant, and it was interesting because I remember the emotion that I felt when my uncle, at the end of the meal that we had just went, him and I, for lunch, and he asked, when the check came and the waiter asked to pay, my uncle said she'll be paying, and he handed off his checkbook. And so I wrote with my right top of a 5-year-old
Yeah.
the amount that needed to be imputed. So yeah, I remember that fondly.
Well, that's fantastic. Just getting you ready for your future career. So that's perfect, right? Here's a technology one. What's the most used app on your phone, excluding WhatsApp or Outlook?
Instagram.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm a visual
I've,
person.
yeah, I've managed to keep away from that, but my wife tends to keep me informed of what I need to know in that regard. So, how about favorite movie of all time?
Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Of
Audrey
course, of course.
Hepburn,
Yeah,
the one
yeah,
and only.
yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's a good one for many people's lists. Now, here's a tricky one. You only get to listen to one song for the rest of your life. What is it?
Feel Good by Gorillaz.
Be careful, because if it could drive you mad. So I think that one's safe, right? Okay. I'm thinking of a number between 1 and 100, and it has a relevance to what we talked about today.
I was going to say 7,
What's the relevance to 7?
because in 2007 I went to Jordan.
Okay. Well, it was close. It was 10, because it is now 10 million passengers. But
Oh, wow.
yeah, but only 2 people have got it right so far, and that's even quite exceptional. I never expected anybody to get it right, but that was close. You were within 3. That's perfect. So you talked about being a bit of a traveler. What's the favorite place you've visited so far, and what's your top bucket list destination?
Mexico City. I love the energy, the culture, the vibrance of this city. And I worked as a consultant for a few weeks in that project of the airport that unfortunately never opened. But I still love very much that city.
It's such a vibrant place, and the food scene, and just everybody thinks they know Mexico because of what they read or hear on the news, but Mexico City is something else, right? Yeah.
It is. And,
Yeah.
it was surprising to me how many actually people speak French in Mexico City.
Yeah. Well, it's very cosmopolitan, right? That's the whole point of these big cities. And what about the place you need to see?
Good question. Argentina, because of the wine.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, didn't they used to call it the Paris of the Americas, right? So you come by that honestly. That's perfect. Okay, this is the final stretch. Your personal mantra in 10 words or less.
Don't prioritize efficiency over effectiveness.
Sometimes we get a little bit obsessed with perfection too, right? Keep it simple and make it work. Well, Belinda, it's been a pure joy doing this, and brings back lots of great memories, and makes me realize that we met some really good people along the way.
Yes, and I'm so glad we have been, part of our lives over the years and really been able to be in touch. I think it shows how strong this project back in Queen Alia was, how as humans we have been connecting through all the challenges, and it's worth it, because today
Absolutely.
we are sharing such a good friendship. Thank you for having me today.
I look forward to seeing you soon at a conference or whatever brings us together. And in the meantime, enjoy your life in New York.
Thank you so much, and I hope to see you for celebrating the 25th anniversary of Terminal 4.
I wouldn't miss it for the world.
Thanks for joining us on Open Mic. If today's conversation sparked ideas or questions, we'd love to hear from you. Visit airportir.com/open mic to listen to more episodes, connect with our team, and stay informed about the global aviation developments that matter to you.